Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. It's the first show of November, so it's time for me to remind you to subscribe to this channel, to press the notification bell, and it's time for me to thank you for your engagement over the past month, for your juicy comments, for your company. I really do appreciate it, and the handful of you that sent a tip jar treat my way for a cup of coffee or a slice of cake, or to put towards Tip Jar Corner. We've got some Tip Jar Corners coming up this month. Thank you all most sincerely. I really do appreciate it. And I also think before we get into things, we should do the Camilla Shuffle. Because this was something that really tickled me. Did you see? All you have to do if you want to join in is to grab the hands of whoever's sitting next to you, or just your armchair, armrests rather, and look rather awkward and flash a smile here or there. And then, what is it she kind of did? She was... Camilla Shuffle. I think we should call it the Camilla Shuffle. She really gave it a go, didn't she? The girl is a good sport. But I was looking through my fingers. I was cringing away. It was so awkward. It was the spirit of the thing that she got into. That is what I admire, and I know that what others found very endearing about it. Bless her. Bless her. Kenya has been a raving success. A raving success, thanks to their Majesty's good humour and spirit, and to the people of Kenya. We'll look at that in a minute. But I did want to mention that today the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay hit Scotland. And they were wonderful. They looked splendidly handsome together. Splendidly handsome couple. I'm not especially a fan of Catherine's centre-parted bouncy bang affair that she's got going on at the moment. It's not really something that I love, but I'm certainly not going to deny that she looked absolutely lovely, because she did. I adored the casual clothing, that vintage Burberry jacket that's kind of checkered, quilted khaki. Very nice, very nice. And I also like the denim she's wearing, the boot cuts with chocolate Chelsea boots. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And of course there was a sighting of the other duo, wasn't there? For Halloween, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Not that the Duchess has to dress up for Halloween. Surely others would be dressing up as her, because she's a fright. She is a fright sight. I should have got out trick-or-treating as her. I could have earned a fortune, couldn't I? Because it's the costume to end all costumes. And how, she looks like the Wicked Witch of West Hollywood. I'll get you, my pretty Catherine, I'll get you, and your little dog too. We've got that one, the Wicked Witch, and then on the other side, the Duke of Puke, who is so vomitous that he looks like a rendition of Casper, the friendly ghost, but not so friendly, mixed and spliced with the orange countenance of Pumpkinhead or a jack-o'-lantern, this kind of affair. So they were a fright for Halloween. Prince Archie was toddling about, and Lily the Pink was in arms. So they had a lovely time. One thing that I must say, I really do think it is a pity for Halloween. Obviously, one's noticed it more and more in recent years. But it was especially vivid this year to be amongst children within my family and beyond for Halloween, and notice how virtually none of them dress up now as the spooky traditional Halloween characters that here in the kingdom children would dress as. Witches, with green faces, dressed in bin bags, warlocks, wizards. And I'm not talking about Harry Potter. I'm just talking about, little crude versions of monsters and werewolves and Frankenstein, Dracula, this kind of thing. This was the way. For time immemorial to recently. And I love the way that Halloween is done in America, but it's very different from how it was done traditionally here in the kingdom. But we've absorbed the influence, and it's a real shame. It's a real pity. And I've been in both America and Canada around the Halloween time, and it really is gorgeously done there as well. I love that way too, but I did love the traditional English way and the English costumes, which has all but vanished so suddenly and quickly. It's another thing that I get all grumpy about and blame the internet for, and the spread of social media, this kind of thing. The children in my family, I noticed some of them are basing their outfits and costumes on computer game characters that had nothing to do with spookiness or Halloween or anything. Computer games. Zelda, does that mean anything to you? I'm not a gamer, as they got, so I don't even know what it's about. They weren't dressed as Zelda, but characters from Zelda. Some of them, and others from other games. It was rather interesting. But the state visit to Kenya has been a raving success. A raving success. Thanks to their majesties, but in very large part thanks to the gorgeous, glorious people of Kenya who have been so warm and so welcoming of our King and Queen. Really, Kenyans, make yourself known in the fruit basket below. Let us know your thoughts, please. Thank you so much for the wonderful welcome. And I was thrilled with Queen Camilla. I was thrilled with her wardrobe, which was very appropriate. She looked gorgeous throughout the whole thing. And yes, they were there in face of some protests, some of them rather understandable, unlike in other quarters. I am sympathetic towards some of those protests. Thousands were killed under the orders of British colonial forces in regards to the Mau Mau uprisings of that era, the rebellions. But it's clear that the majority in Kenya approach this with maturity. And also I've heard a lot of Kenyans speaking about their involvements and violence coming from their side, Kenyans on Kenyans during the same time. I'm not going to draw any proportionality or comparisons with that. That's for other people to do. But most Kenyans aren't even asking for this apology that the press are making a great big meal out of, and some protesters not asking for apologies or dwelling in bitterness. It was so apparent. Firstly, they were understanding of the fact that we now live in a completely different age, and secondly, it was clear that they wanted to move forward constructively. All the talk was on moving forward. Let's turn this into a win-win situation and look at what we've got in common instead of the grievances of many decades ago, which is very constructive. And it is an illustration of the grace of the people of Kenya. This is what grace looks like. And do you see how effortless it is on the faces of the Kenyans? Effortless, very royal, a lesson in royalty. They showed a great deal of respect, waving their Union Jacks aloft as well, out of respect for their majesties, not even for their own company, their former colonizers, waving the flag. Lots of curtsying, lots of bowing. I even saw a lad or two performing a curtsy, which was such a sweet thing to see, and enjoying doing it as well, enjoying the company of the King and Queen, not looking as if they're there under duress. Really touching. And their majesties travelled from Nairobi to Mombasa, and when they arrived at Mombasa, they were greeted by double rainbows. Isn't that rather special? The rare sight of double rainbows. The king met with a 117-year-old. No, it wasn't Meghan. No. This gentleman had a lot more class than the Duchess, and the king presented him with replacement campaign medals. And do you remember when the late Elizabeth died, we spoke about what she might be remembered as? I think I proposed Elizabeth the Loved or Elizabeth the Beloved, although it seems that Catherine is now Charles's beloved. But we all shared our thoughts on that and what she might be known as, the loyal, the faithful. Well, she's just our dear old Queen Liz, isn't she, my dear? But we shared thoughts on that. I was thinking over Charles. Charles could go down in history as Charles the Culpable. As Charles the Culpable, because of everything that's being thrown at him, the poor man. You've got to feel for him. You've got to feel for him. He's born into this role of which he has no control over. It's his destiny. It's his fate. He works tirelessly his entire life, dedicating a lot of it to helping communities from the Commonwealth, not just those here within the kingdom. Dedicates his life as the longest serving heir in history. all that time, and then he takes on his role as head of state to this kingdom and 14, 15 other realms in his mid-70s, when everybody else is thinking about, putting their feet up and taking a nice, long, enjoyable retirement and cruising around. That is when his calling, his true work begins, as winter season sets in. And he knows that he will have to work every day of his life, if he goes on as long as the Queen, until 96, maybe longer. Every day of his life, working and toiling and doing his service till his last breath, or until he becomes incapacitated, which is quite a daunting prospect, isn't it, when you think about it. And he has inherited all the culpability of crimes of empire that preceded his existence. He was born as it was dying out and had virtually expired. Whereas his mother, our darling Queen Elizabeth II, we adored her, but let's face it, she escaped. She totally escaped all of the calls for apologies and for retribution and reparations. More or less, she escaped it all, and it was all handed down to Charles to deal with at the age of 75. I wouldn't blame him for being bitter about it, but he doesn't strike me as showing that bitterness. But I wouldn't blame him at all, to be quite honest, for ending up with that. What I will blame him for is for his wardrobe. And I'm a little bit reticent to say this because I'm a great defender of his wardrobe and his style. I stick by the fact that he has historically been a style icon. He's much admired by all. He knows what he's talking about. And this flies in the face of what I've said before, but there were a few occasions on this Kenya trip where photographs of His Majesty did flash up, and I felt rather disappointed that, if I'm going to cast aspersions at the likes of Meghan for looking like a box of rags, well, I like our King Cozy Socks looking a bit crumpled from time to time, but this was a bit, it does push it. I hear those of you in the comments that will disagree with me from time to time and say that he does push it with the wrinkles and the sort of flapping about of the materials. I don't know what the solution is, but there are some occasions. He looked great at the state banquet. That was a bit more sharp. I don't want him to change his personality or his aristocratic style. I really don't. But I do want him to remain looking kingly. And there were times, I'm afraid, especially during some of the daytime events of this Kenya trip, where he looked rather not only dishevelled, but I would say unkempt at some point. It's usually fine down here to about here. I haven't noticed the eyebrows reaching out too far. Maybe he's had a bit of a trim here and there because they were getting insanely long as well. He's all right down to about here. And then as it goes down here towards the bottom, all kinds of things flap about in the breeze, and sometimes it's just a little bit too much. The spirit of Kenya was encapsulated by the Senator Olakina Ladama. Did you see that segment? It went rather viral.
Should we be having a discussion with the British on how they can be able to return back our history, our ornaments that they have in their museums back to Kenya? Yes. Are we ready to receive them? Maybe not. We might just make a huge hula baloo about them, but then when they come here, they become insignificant. But is it fair for us to point all our daggers on the monarch when he's coming? No, it's not. Because for over 60 years, we'll soon be celebrating 60 years. So we need to ask ourselves, our women, he cares about women. He does a lot of programs on women. Should we now be looking and saying, how do we empower our women? How do we support our women? I think King Charles is a fair gentleman. We'll be able to come in and see, and then we'll have that conversation. Right. I have visited some farms in Wales, and one of the things that I admire the most about King Charles is that he supports organic farming. Let it go down the history and say, the King Charles, his first visit to Kenya was hospitable, he was visited well, we had casual conversation, we had discussions, and see how can we make it better. I think in everything that we do, my brother, we should be future-centric. We should say, how is it going to benefit the future generation?
But when the colonial masters left, did they hand over that land back to the people? Yes, they did. But what happened? our greedy politicians at that time allocated themselves those lands. You know, did the truth be told, and we need to be very factual and be honest. You know, when we took independence, was the leadership then given money to compensate or given land to compensate their own people who suffered? Yes, they were given. Did they keep it to themselves? Yes, they kept it to themselves. So really, we cannot blame the monarchy for everything. They left. Right. It is us and our stupidity that made us become corrupt the way we are, to a point where today we are still saying we want compensation, And when that compensation comes, it's some greedy 2, 3, or 4 people who take all that money. It's ludicrous.
And I found that attitude far more commendable and honest and less money grubbing than other countries who are demanding reparations and returns from all over the place. We'd love to return Meghan. I really enjoyed the Queen's giraffe print dress. Wasn't that inspired? Gorgeous, gorgeous. And it put me in mind of the animal print that she wore recently at the reception for Kenya. So she seems to be dancing on a theme, and it's gone down very well. I'm surprised she hasn't been accused of appropriating culture. I'm a great fan of appropriating culture. I'm doing it a little bit right now. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the joy and the juice and the fun of life. I was also pleased to see a strong focus on tree planting. There was lots of talk and chatter about trees. And at the state banquet, the King gave a speech that was very well received. It was quite wonderful. And how could it not be wonderful with those green glitter curtains in the background? How lovely. It's like Christmas at the gay pub. And of course, the King put smiles on a few faces by referring to Catherine as his beloved daughter-in-law. The King said that it was here, in the sight of Mount Kenya, that my son, the Prince of Wales, proposed to his wife, now my beloved daughter-in-law. Not that we didn't know already, but he is making it very clear how cherished his daughter-in-law is. No, not you, Rachel. You dumb shit. No, not you. In your dreams. In your dreams. She is the cherished daughter-in-law. You are the perished daughter-in-law. Perished. Love perished in the frost. But Catherine is beloved of the King. My beloved daughter-in-law. But what about my wife, Pa? My wife, Meg, what about her, Pa? My beloved Pa. You made your choice, boy. You made your choice. Traitor. Traitor. And I must admit that as he said it and used the word beloved, I thought, I wonder if this is one of the last times in history, perhaps the last, that, you know, you'll hear a word like my beloved bandied about, because it's rather traditional, is it, for members of the royal family to use that word to describe their other half. My beloved, my darling. I think I've heard William say darling at some point. Maybe even Harry, my darling wife. I'm not quite sure. But my beloved, it's rather antiquated, isn't it? But gorgeously so, my beloved. I really hope that these things stay in fashion forever. But it put me in mind of the word regard, because, and I might have mentioned this before because it tickled me a few months ago, but you know how the word regard, or we use it when signing off, it's a bit officey, isn't it? Kind regards, or send my regard to your mother, this kind of thing. It's rather formal, but there was a time when sharing regards and having regard, and when used in communication, was very intimate, very intimate. And I'm talking about the Victorian era, and going through onto the Georgian era as well. And there were little love tokens that were made, and regard jewellery, and the words would spell out which jewels we used on little cluster rings and brooches and necklaces and bangles and baubles and bracelets. So regards, for instance, would be R for a ruby, E for emerald, G for garnet, A for amethyst, R for another ruby, and D for diamond, that kind of thing. Or you would have the word love, which would include lapis lazuli, opal, vermeil and emeralds, and other words such as adore or dearest would be spelt out using the stones. And I say this because when I discovered that a few months ago, it's made me a little bit more cautious about where and when I use the word regard, because I understand a little bit more about its history and the intimate nature of it. You know, I will be quite selective about when I sign off here and there using that word. If I don't hold them in regard, I won't use it. Do you understand? And this was no empty state visit. It was full of meaning, full of significance, and the Prince's Trust have been working in Kenya for several years, helping to support over 13,000 young people. And you see many of them in these photos. Tell me again, because I'll ask quite often and keep doing so. Where do you see other institutions providing this sort of authentic and tireless support globally? This is in stark contrast to the showy, bawdy, tacky cabarets that you see from the likes of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Yeah, I'll say it. Rushing all over the globe on their private jets because they just simply had to go and lay some flowers at the site of various tragedies and make up lunch pails and bake cookies and scrawl Hallmark tidings on bananas. So vulgar. So dilettante. Vulgar, vulgar, vulgar. The King and Queen show us exactly how it's done. Effortlessly. I also really loved this cornflower blue number as worn by Queen Camilla, and she was treated to some time feeding baby elephants and a little baby rhino. And back in the kingdom, Kate the Beloved visited Dad Vengers, where she joined in for a dad walk. And the Royal Foundation's Early Childhood are working to support fathers through Catherine's Shaping Us campaign. Yes, they're hard at work, highlighting the importance of fathers in children's lives. And she went down a treat. There she is in her stripes, full of fun, full of giggles. She loves spending time with the little ones, doesn't she? And she was having a good old chuckle with the daddies there, and they seem to be very much enjoying the company of our beautiful Catherine the Beloved. And moving away from royalty for a moment, that house of cards known as wokery is falling, isn't it? Deck by deck. This time involving BLM, Black Lives Matter, that wheeze, that absolute hoax. A statue protest organiser from here in the kingdom has been jailed. Guess what? What for? You know, as if you couldn't guess what for. Charity fraud. Yes. Seems to be a running theme, doesn't it, for all these BLM organisers, Black Lives Matter organisers. Well, apparently fraudster lives really matter, more than black people's lives. Because this one, Zara Salim, spent over £30,000 that had been donated by gullible, stupid idiots who deserved to be fleeced, in my own opinion. To be honest, I haven't really got any sympathy for them. They deserve to be fleeced and shown up, you know. Apparently they presumed that this money was going to help deprived young people. No. And this she spent apparently 6,000 of this was on taxis, on Ubers and beauty treatments, products and takeaways. Takeaways. Honestly. She's the one that organised the toppling of the statue of Edward Coulson, and she was the co-founder of All Black Lives Bristol. Oh, and she also used it to purchase an iPhone and a computer. And in her defence, she claims that she had bad psychosis. She suffers from psychosis. She said, let's just say my brain spent it. I can't tell you what, where or why. I don't know what I spent it on. She was diagnosed with suffering from depression. And now she is a nanny volunteer for Islamic Aid, the charity Islamic Aid. Yes, that's what she does. Kool-Aid, I should say. Kool-Aid. We ain't drinking any of it, are we, my dears? Stay fruity and always on royal duty. Toodle pip.